Hey everyone! As we continue our partnership with the Legacy Expo, today's episode features Laura Lavallee from Evergreen Hospice. Laura and I had a great conversation and we covered so much ground about supporting marginalized communities as it comes to navigating grief, the importance of inclusivity, and navigating the challenges of running a non-for-profit. Laura shared her journey into hospice care, her mission to create individualized and culturally competent care, and how her team is dedicated to changing the narrative around grief and end-of-life options. This conversation is full of insight and heart, so let's jump in. Laura, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm honored to be here.
To get us started, can you share your journey into becoming the CEO of Evergreen Hospice and what inspired you to take on this role?
What a question. And what a cool job I have, eh? Um, I get to talk to people about something they essentially don't want to talk about. We have a little joke within the space. It won't kill you to talk to us. As a society, we have this unique ability to compartmentalize death almost to an othering. And it's my personal belief in relationship with death in itself that I find it empowering to talk about. And my role within Evergreen is centered upon holding space for our community in a space that they wish they didn't have to be held in. So, I'm humbled by the work my team does on a daily basis. On a Tuesday, we're in a locker room counseling teens about the loss of a 15-year-old defenseman. On Wednesday, we're running a women's oncology support group and providing, knitted inserts following their mastectomy. And on Thursday, our nurse is doing intake on a new mom that's, navigating being a new mom without the support of her mom. So we are quite literally supporting death and dying for all three large geographical areas. And it's, an honor to do that.
And you're supporting the communities within Markham, Steuville, and Thornhill, right?
Yeah, Markham, Stouffville, and Thornhill, exactly.
Yeah, beautiful. And when it comes to Evergreen Hospice, what is that unique approach that you take when supporting these communities? And what are some of the services that you provide?
Yeah, so it's a holistic in nature. We have an accredited, registered in-home hospice, so a day hospice. So not only do we have clinicians go out in the community and provide end-of-life and palliative supports within the home, we have a day hospice, so community members can come in for the day and find respite, as well as educational support, system navigation, all the way to brief and bereavement support. So everything you can imagine from a support group where there's that peer-to-peer, camaraderie, solidarity, all the way to quite literally, how do I write a will? How do I make sure my family's taken care of? That basket of supports that surround death and dying is quite large in breadth, but also and it diverse. It changes based on the needs of who we're working with. So anything around palliative, from our intake system navigation. We have registered counselors, social prescribing, psychosocial supports. The Evergreen has really blossomed in response to the community needs over the 35 years.
And I just want to go back to what you mentioned a little bit earlier, just around the types of support that you're providing for individuals, particularly the mother who is going to be a mother who doesn't have a mother.
Mhm. Yes.
That's a really unique, like just calling that out in terms of supporting the folks who have gone through grief either earlier on in life and certain milestones that they hit. And it's
Mhm.
a reminder of, oh, shit.
Yes, exactly. And it's something that, as we know, and sort of what I was saying earlier about people want to compartmentalize grief and death and dying into a box. And really in that 35 years, we've really seen the community change in the response of how we interact with death and dying. And people would say, Evergreen, they know about us if they need us, but that we're not at the forefront of those conversations because, by human nature, we're scared to have those conversations. And so my role has been very interesting, navigating how we both respect and honor that legacy and the way in which people grieve and the way in which people process having a palliative diagnosis, but also being responsive to the changing needs of young mothers, young families, people that really have grown up in the culture of we're talking about it. Enough have gone are the days of this is a quiet conversation that happens in a dark room, and then we move on from it. And there's, some toxic statements such as, it happened for the best, and we close that book and move on. Grief is something that carries with you the entirety of your life. And we need to acknowledge that, honor it, respect it, and let people bring their whole selves to the organization and to the community at large. And so I help to be a small piece in that puzzle to help change that narrative.
And again, you mentioned this has been going on for 35 years of service. Like that's a long
Yes.
time to be supporting these communities. How have you seen the support that you're providing evolve and change with the needs of the community that you're speaking to?
Yeah, I think very much so, like we were just touching on, is that we've had to understand that the comfort level of the community and who's receptive. An example would be is we have an upcoming gala, and I promise it's not a plug. It's more so the gala is respecting those 35 years. We have the history, so we have newspaper clippings from all of the events we've ran over those 35 years. 1989, we have people sitting at a kitchen table launching this organization. And that's beautiful and valid and important to tell in our story because that's what brought us here today. And it comes really a little bit tied to religious backgrounds. Palliative in nature had this tie to end of life planning, what's next. And there was a large faith component in the history of hospice and palliative care, and how we've transitioned to address the needs of our diverse community through time has been organic in nature, but really needing a bit more intentionality now. And so, in 1997, we started launching grief and bereavement support programs when we weren't funded to do so. And so, in the late 90s, we worked with local school boards going to school saying, individuals that have lost their mothers or fathers and how they now can show up to school, educating the teachers, educating the social support system on how, children's education. You can go for really, if you sort of start at almost like the saying is like an onion, but there's so many layers around grief, death, support, and dying that we need to make sure that we're looking at all. So I think, again, we have been responsive, or continue to be responsive, and I think you'll see a very stark shift in the next, under my leadership, in the direction of inclusivity and the ways in which we execute on care.
And now, when it comes to funding, you mentioned that a little bit in your last answer. Only 30% of your budget is actually coming from the Ministry of Health. That
Yeah.
is, it's fun. It's great that there's money coming in. And also, that is not a lot. And I've been with organizations in the past where they've received no funding. All of
Yeah.
it, or a large majority, is coming from donors who are very close to the cause, recognize the importance, the impact, and everything. How do you manage the funding challenges associated with this? And also, what are your thoughts on the current level of government support for organizations like yours? And what would you love to advocate for to see changed?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think, as you said, 70% of our operating costs are covered by the supportive community, essentially. So, we quite literally keep our doors open for those 35 years, from volunteer support, executing on the care, on the support systems, on the wraparound services, and generous donations. And so I think, there's twofold. I think in one part, there's a perception when you're working in hospice care that we are well funded, that we are, an arm of the hospital or an extended arm of the Ministry of Health. And when you really have to, again, bring visibility on eyes on the way in which we function, and we are, a community-based non-for-profit that relies on the community support to continue. And so it's a lot of re-education around that. And so I would love to say, if the need for us translated into dollars, I'm confident we would be a well-oiled financial machine. But, the reality is that it's a juggling of responsibilities. We need to balance the community needs while developing strong fundraising strategy, writing grants, retaining and engaging donors, advocating politically. We're tasked with raising community awareness as well as managing volunteer programs, but keeping an eye on cost efficiency, and all the while ensuring that we don't compromise the quality of care we provide. So it's a real challenge, if I'm being honest. We're running on community support, which is both beautiful and hard. And I hope that the ministry funding one day correlates with the community need and the community impact that we have. A good information of that would be, if you look at, we're funded from, funding ties directly to stats and, the impact and what we're measured on. And Evergreen Hospice hit what we were measured on before the first quarter. So within the first 3 months, what we were funded to execute on, we delivered on in those 3 months. And so that really means the entirety of the calendar year is funded on donations.
So clearly, obviously, community support and individual donors is very, very important in terms of sustaining the operations.
Exactly, exactly. Yes. And you saw, that landscape change following COVID, and there was an awareness. And how do you keep that momentum going? How do you keep educating? And, as a society, with inflation, it's hard for everybody. And so I think we're really seeing an impact of that across palliative and hospice care in the larger community, and really hoping to look towards sort of like larger legislative bodies to say, what are we going to do here to bridge the gap? We have baby boomers, we have, we're an aging demographic right now, and specifically in our three regions, and the need isn't going to go away. And so it's going to get harder and harder to ignore.
And you mentioned under your leadership, there's going to be a shift, an adjustment in terms of the communities that you're supporting and speaking to.
Mhm.
How do you see Evergreen Hospice addressing the specific needs of LGBTQ plus clients in your community, particularly around,
Mhm.
for example, disenfranchised grief, which is where when someone's grieving and society collectively, like as a whole, typically view that grief as unwarranted. It's like you should not
Mhm.
be grieving this way. How are you
Mhm.
addressing these needs?
Yeah, I think really, and it's not to say we didn't do it before, but really very much so being loud about it, and the intentionality around recognizing and respecting the unique experiences and challenges that individuals are facing. And so, that there's the client-centered approach, and we focus on each person as an individual with their own unique history, families, needs, and rather than putting them into categories, we aim to understand them holistically and acknowledge all social stigmas and barriers that may or may not encounter, and understanding that the model of who we sort of envision when we originally thought of a hospice, it's deep, like I said, deep rooted in, conversations around death and healing are inevitably around a frame and a vision you have of an aging individual that's lived a long, beautiful life and now is looking for those support systems. That's not what we're looking at in our society. And I think, again, COVID shed light on that image of death and dying in our community, and we just need to continue to support that, and yeah, advocate that this narrative that we've put around and like to think that people have envisioned for hospice and palliative care. It's changing, it's adapting, and that's really exciting to see, and our staff, deepen understanding on health risks, legal risks, the importance of using inclusive language, and this sort of comprehensive approach not only meets people's needs and honors their identities, their relationships, and enhances their overall quality of their life, just understanding that LGBTSQ communities have different diverse needs and have different meanings of families and relationships, much like anybody. And so really not coming with any preconceived notions or bias, and understanding your innate bias when you're interacting with anybody that comes through Evergreen Doors is a major priority for us.
And if you can walk me through what really encouraged you, or what did you see where you were like, oh, we need to be louder about how we're supporting this community? Like, walk me through that process with your team members.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's beautiful things that are happening in the community when it comes to, marginalized demographics. And really, there's looking for the need for specialized programs. As you're aware, trans and non-binary people and families and youth in our community, there's no specific place that relations to palliative care. And so much like palliative care has that history, again, those conversations are opening up. And so by no means am I a leader or expert in this specifically, but understanding that we can't, when we gone are the days of the, cookie cutter fabric where anybody comes through our system. Okay, great. Are you grieving? Here's your 6 sessions. You're going to be fixed, so to speak, by the time you leave us. We can wash our hands and we're gone. It doesn't work like that. Palliative care doesn't work like that. Hospice care doesn't work like that. And so much like anyone that comes through our doors is needing to understand what their needs are. So, that can come from cultural competency training, policy development, so ensuring that the language we're using, patient and family advocacy groups, which we've started, community outreach and support. And again, that loop back mechanism is we're setting ways to gather that feedback to ensure we're continuing to be nimble and reflecting that voice collectively. So, and really leadership. I have an incredible board of directors that visibly and strongly support inclusive practices and allocate resources to those important initiatives.
And when it comes to training and educating and equipping your staff with the resources and the tools that they need to provide that
Mhm.
inclusive and sensitive care to your clients, what does that training and that support look like for the staff?
Yeah, it's really open conversation for them to understand the bias that they bring. So understanding their privilege and understanding their bias, and really the sort of coined phrase that is common, but I use very much so is I don't know what I don't know, and so and we don't know what we don't know about an individual. So you really just have to acknowledge that, irregardless if you're aware of your bias, they exist. And so even myself, as someone coming into the community as a white woman, understanding that I'm not going to be able to understand the needs of the demographic that I'm walking to in some situations. So I need to ask. And I am fine to come in a humble position, acknowledging that I have a bias, acknowledging that I don't know. And I feel that practice is echoed in sort of my personal and my professional life, very much so in sitting on, I'm the treasurer of the board of directors of Black Creek Community Health, focused around bringing health equity to Jane and Finch and marginalized communities, and Black health into Black hands, and really just trying to find different ways that we approach holistic community care and holistic healthcare in a way that is receptive to everybody, whether it be religion, whether it be race, whatever we are addressing at that time. It needs to have that equitable approach. And the only way to do that is individualized care.
And I have to ask, for folks who may be saying, oh, we don't need to have individualized care. We don't need to do this. We just need to provide
Mhm.
care. It doesn't have to be specific. Um, what would you say to folks who are just having those thoughts and ideas?
Yeah, I mean, clearly they've never been through the system themselves, and needed the supports and services. And so to say that you're not meeting people where they're at, I mean, it depends who you're talking to. I think if you're talking to anyone who's like a very quantitative mind, is, statistically and mathematically holistic care that meets that community needs, like your EMS aversion, your hospital bed, hospital bed admissions go down when you have care that's responsive to what people need. And also, you've seen a large piece of palliative care over the years when you give individuals that home-like support, when you meet them where they're at, when you provide their needs as they are outlining them to be, their prognosis can improve. And so I would say there's a cost-saving element to it, depending what their vested interest is, or just very much so you can't continue to run a society on that approach. Yeah, it just won't work. It's a very good question. Is that how do you advocate for people to have their needs met? I just think that the question itself comes from such a place of ignorance that it would be hard for me to have yeah, a succinct response. It's a long weighted question.
I I'm sorry, I have to ask it.
Oh, no, no, I like it. That's fantastic. I'm grateful for the opportunity to chat today.
um, when it comes to advocating for these needs, what challenges do you encounter that come about when wanting to implement this type of framework, and how do you navigate those challenges?
Yeah. Again, hospice movement is deep roots, and beautiful roots, but starting from local community religious organizations, to make, this movement is steeped in history and belief systems. And we've, changing the conversation around death and dying. So our volunteer coordinator often jokes, dead people don't vote. And when you're advocating the needs of those clients, knowing that, ultimately, to get that awareness, you have to have the conversation and having to advocate for them in a way that makes sense and impacts them. So while these sayings can be humorous, or sayings like, it won't kill you to talk to us, you're really shedding light on that stigma and needing to foster awareness. And so, challenges, I would say, is coming from a place of just trying to understand that in order for us to progress as a society, we need to understand, what the challenges are first, and then how do we then create the environment so those challenges don't impact the greater collective good.
I remember speaking with a few folks who are working with ALS Canada, and one of the topics was around advocates. Why are there no advocates for ALS? People who are really like the face of
Yeah.
getting research, advocating for it, everything. And the people were like, because they all die. Like they're
Yeah.
it's a in most cases, generally speaking, it's fast progressing. And by the time someone does release a book or does do a speaking engagement or anything like that, they unfortunately end up dying from the disease. And there is the inability to have that advocate, that ongoing face of
Mm-hmm.
the campaigns and being like, we need to
Mm-hmm.
put money into this. We need to talk about this. We need to address it. Very similar with things when it comes to end of life care and end of life support. People die
Mm-hmm.
and people don't necessarily recognize, oh, we actually need to fund this or we need to support this because it's
Yeah.
important. Everyone's going to go through this.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's scary, right? I think people like to sort of close their eyes and think that we're all Superman, and nobody wants to think that, the fact that we're not immortal. And I think that people typically don't want to have those conversations until they have to have those conversations. And as you know, statistically, when you look at, the larger demographic of the world, what are people talking about at the end of life planning? They're talking about their family, they're talking about supporting their loved ones, they're talking about the needs for that for the people around them. But somehow, yeah, you plan a wedding for months and months and months, and then it comes to a funeral, and people often are left with not knowing what to do. So I think there's an element of scarcity there, and fear. Yeah,
Yeah.
scarcity of resources and fear.
Yeah. When you envision the future of hospice care, particularly in the terms of inclusivity and community support, what do you see coming about?
Yeah,
Where do you want it to go?
yeah. I think really engaging the community, so building strong support networks that involve the whole family in that care planning is crucial. So a robust system of support for individuals. Educational initiatives, so all ages, so benefits of early hospice referrals. Right now hospice referrals come typically in the last palliative referrals within the last 6 months of life, but understanding the need for those referrals to come early, for the whole family. Policy improvements, so again, advancing regulations and policies to support hospice care, being a priority and an agenda politically. And really just, leaning on technology, culturally competent care, and tailored care plans. So those are, again, three larger categories, but just making sure that we are tailoring our care plans to be specific, and utilizing communication tools, much like Ontario Health is moving towards, to have that, treating people as individuals and letting them bring their whole self to palliative care.
Beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, and just being authentic in life and also being authentic in death. Yeah.
Exactly. Beautifully said.
Can you share any upcoming projects or initiatives that you guys are working on?
Yeah, Maria. So when we started, we were chatting about the new mom. And so we are working in partnership with to launch the new mothers support group. And so we've had supports along and we've had, connectivity across the community, but really launching this initiative to new mothers. So working with our local birthing centers, as well as, our local community centers where children would gather, be it a library, be it an early on, and letting people know that there are different things that come up in being a first-time mom in general. It's a scary time, and as a mother of three children, it's a very destabilizing time. And so understanding that innate support system that sometimes can ignorantly be assumed as come from home, and you see that across the board. It's just a bit of an assumption that when women have children, that they have this larger family or this larger community. And people luckily have progressively, toyed with the fact of, when is this village coming? And you see that across motherhood, but very much are launching this program with intentionality to understand the barriers that women face when they don't have that mother support when they are becoming a mother. We were also launching a secondary office in the Stouffville 55 plus community center, which is great, meets our community needs where they're at. And we're making some big steps towards having a residential hospice come to fruition. So lots of big things in motion this upcoming year, and we're excited to be in the trenches with the community.
And you are also going to be part of the Legacy Expo taking place in
Yes,
September and taking place multiple times throughout the year.
yes.
How did you
Very
get
excited.
involved? Yeah, how did you get involved? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, again, it's one of our wonderful volunteers that had come and flagged this to us. So again, speaking to those 100 volunteers that I was astonished. And, having a background and working in a variety of non-for-profits, I've never seen the investment of volunteers like I have at Evergreen. And I tie that to both incredible leadership internally. I have an amazing staff. Our volunteer lead is fantastic. Her name is Trisha. I, couldn't do this without her, but also just more so that tie. And so we do find that a lot of the individuals that volunteer have a personal relationship with Evergreen, and they've had to come to us in some way, and then they see the importance. And so we heard about the expo through one of our volunteers volunteers who made the organic connection. And that's quite, how I ended up talking to you today. So I think it aligns very much of, again, that awareness, that connectivity to the larger holistic model around death and dying. And it's exciting to see, really honored to be a part of it.
Beautiful, beautiful. And my last question for you is, how do you want to be remembered?
Oh, that is a big question. Well, I think I would want my 3 living kids to remember me as being cool, and fiercely and aggressively loving them, relentlessly loving them. I hope my friends enjoyed hanging out with me, and that my partner still believes hitching his cart to my wagon was a wise choice. And I would say, grit, integrity, and love is how I hope to be remembered. Thank you for
Beautiful.
asking.
Beautiful. Thank you for answering.
Of course.
Any last words you want to share, words of wisdom, thoughts, insights, and how, no pressure, and
Yeah.
let folks know how to get into contact with you.
Yeah, and so, we can always be found at EVG Cares, and we have a hash, and you can find us either on Instagram or on our website. Always open to new partnership and ideas, as I mentioned, sort of being new to Evergreen and specifically looking to ways that we can better support the community. So there's a variety of different ways that you can provide that feedback to us, but please do reach out to us on our Instagram at Evergreen Community Hospices. So Evergreen Hospice on Instagram as evgcares.com. And so, yeah, please continue the conversation. Please continue to advocate and understand the need to break the stigma around death and dying. And please just understand that your community hospices aren't funded fully by the Ministry of Health, and they're working hard with, like-minded individuals to change that, to change the awareness and the education pieces around it. And yeah, don't be afraid of death and dying.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thanks, Maria. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Laura as much as I did. Her commitment to supporting marginalized communities and the work Evergreen Hospice is doing to provide holistic, individualized care can inspire and influence other providers. From changing the way we approach grief to expanding services for those in need, Laura and Evergreen Hospice's dedication to the space shines through. Be sure to check out the show notes for more information on Evergreen Hospice and all of the resources that we mentioned. If you found this episode valuable, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and follow us online at Philotimo Life. That's PHILOTIMOLIFE. Thanks for listening, and until next time.